small, but I'm talking about coping strategies related to scan anxiety levels in the months and days prior to patients with lung cancer CT scans. This project actually served as my dissertation project for my PhD program. And so before I begin with the presentation, I want to give a shout out to Jenny for asking me to come speak today, as well as to Savannah for helping coordinate this presentation. This project was also funded by the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, also known as NCATS, which allowed us to recruit individuals from LCI as well as nationwide. So first I wanted to talk about my partnership with LCI and how we got connected to do this research. I reached out to Dr. Edwin Fisher over at the UNC Gilling School of Global Public Health, who has extensive research experience working with individuals with lung cancer in order to better inform my research methods, since I was coming from a developmental background. So working with Dr. Fisher, he connected us to LCI in order to get more informed and talk to members of the community in order to better inform my research methods. So after creating this collaboration and this team, we decided to apply for a grant through NC Tracks, which we luckily received, and were able to recruit individuals to participate in my study. So Jenny and Colleen, the previous patient community specialist, helped with recruitment and outreach among the LCI community, as well as with individuals nationwide. So just to give you a little bit of background on my work and why I decided to pursue this area of research. Generally, as many of you are probably familiar with, scan anxiety or scan-related anxiety has less to do with the fear of the scan itself, but more to do with what that scan will tell them about their diagnosis. Unfortunately, a lot of work hasn't actually looked at how scan anxiety fluctuates or changes in the months and days prior to one CT scan, though we know that individuals with lung cancer are getting these scans on a regular basis. So the goal here was to examine how individuals are coping with the scan anxiety in the months and days prior to their scan, which majority of the work that does look at coping with scan anxiety looks at after the scan has actually occurred. Another factor I wanted to consider in this work are the differences between people. As we know, there's a wide variety of individuals that are diagnosed with lung cancer each year, and so understanding how certain differences between people could influence outcomes with cancer is very important. Specifically, the age of the individual is very important, as some work shows that individuals who are diagnosed at a younger age than what is typically expected with their cancer diagnosis tend to report poor outcomes and more increased mental health issues. So the purpose of this study was just to track coping strategies and scan-related anxiety in those with lung cancer in the months and days prior to their scan. So unlike the previous presentation, this was not an intervention, but more along the lines of trying to understand what is happening, since we don't necessarily know how coping and anxiety fluctuate through this time period. And I also wanted to see how the age of the individual could potentially impact this relationship. So the first style of coping that I wanted to investigate was proactive coping. Proactive coping is a forward-thinking coping strategy, so you're anticipating the stressor or stressful event to occur sometime in the future. It tends to be more stable across time, so I measured it on a monthly basis, so about every 30 days. And with this coping, individuals engage in efforts to prevent or modify how the stressful event unfolds. You may not know when the stressful event will occur, which participants in my sample, some of them knew around the time their scan was going to happen, or they knew the exact date, but they had a general idea of when it might occur in the future. So this is a forward-focused coping strategy. But it involves resource allocation, so individuals are focused on spending time, energy, money, resources on preparing for the stressful event. And so interestingly, with the monthly results that I found, in the months prior to one scan, when individuals reported increases in proactive coping, they reported increases in scan anxiety, which we typically don't see because proactive coping tends to be related to better outcomes. It's typically more helpful in reducing anxiety. So this got me thinking about why this could potentially be happening with my sample. And looking back into proactive coping, as I mentioned, it involves a lot of resource allocation. So individuals are preparing in advance and are potentially thinking of, worst case scenario after they receive the results of their scan. which in my sample of individuals, they reported, about half reported that they received the notice that there was no evidence of disease in their scan, or that it was stable. So they received these good outcomes, and while they were preparing for worst case scenario, potentially having to engage in more treatments, they may have depleted their resources and therefore weren't able to focus on other areas that could have helped manage their scan anxiety. The next style of coping I wanted to investigate was anticipatory coping. This is more targeted and involves thought processing behaviors to actually prepare for that specific stressful event as it approaches. So I investigated this style of coping in the days prior to one scan. And this individuals with this style of coping, they have a general idea of when the stressor will occur. And so, and because of the fact that it is less stable, it tends to fluctuate significantly from day to day. So I wanted to measure and see how the style of coping changes daily along with scan anxiety. And so these 4 types of coping, anticipatory coping, are different forms of anticipatory coping. The first 2 tend to be related to counterproductive outcomes. So a lot of people think that coping in general is a good thing, but there are some coping styles that tend to be related to counterproductive outcomes. And these first 2 tend to be related to those. Stagnant deliberation is generally, I listed examples of items from the measure on the slide, but stagnant deliberation in general just involves thinking about the problem, so thinking about the scan, without coming up with a plan of how to address the issue or what they're going to prepare for. Outcome fantasy just involves, daydreaming that the problem will fix itself, so just kind of hoping it resolves itself or goes away, also without preparing for worst case scenario. Plan rehearsal and problem analysis are actually related to more productive outcomes, better outcomes. Plan rehearsal involves more of a step-by-step plan of how they're going to address the problem when it happens, and problem analysis involves making sense of the issue and clearly defining the problem and how it is impacting them. And so after collecting this data in the days prior to the scan, not surprisingly, I found that increases in stagnant deliberation and outcome fantasy were related to increases in scan anxiety, which these styles of coping, so just thinking about the problem a lot without coming up with a plan to address it, as well as just hoping that the problem fixes itself, tends to be reported frequently among individuals with cancer. So for this study, it was expected to occur, and so that was reflected in my results. Interestingly though, I did find a significant impact of age of the individual on daily coping and scan anxiety levels. Specifically that middle-aged participants in my study who are around the ages of 54 to 43 reported on days when they used more problem analysis style of coping, which again means individuals are trying to understand why the problem is happening to them. They reported increases in scan anxiety, which I wasn't expecting to find here. Because typically in anxiety interventions, clearly defining the problem and understanding why it's happening actually helps reduce anxiety. So again, I was speculating as to why this would potentially be happening in my sample. And so one of the things I thought of, coming from a developmental background, was the idea of a social clock. So many of us are familiar with, at certain ages in our life, there are things that are expected, or we may be expected to undergo, or such as marriage, things of that nature. And so not being on time with cancer diagnosis, so this group of individuals who are diagnosed a lot sooner than one would actually be expected, if they're trying to make sense of the problem and trying to define it and why it's happening to them and are unable to come up with a logical reason as to why it's happening, they may experience those increases in scan anxiety in the days prior to their scan as that stressor is getting closer in time. So again, as I mentioned, this wasn't intended to be an intervention study, but as all good interventions do, it's good to get a solid base of knowledge of what is happening with the factors that you're trying to change. So as I mentioned, not a lot of work has looked at how coping and scan anxiety change from month to month and day to day. So this study is serving as a baseline for future intervention work to potentially intervene on these coping strategies to help promote better management of scan anxiety, because as many of us know, we may not be able to eliminate scan anxiety, but we can definitely try to work in maintaining it. It's also important to consider the differences between person when implementing interventions, because as my study showed, age of the individual may be a large factor. In the future, I would like to do more work into other factors that could influence it as well, like cancer history, diagnosis history, those sorts of things. And so future intervention work should definitely take these things into account. So the key takeaway from this study was that it is normal to experience anxiety before a scan. And it can be as soon as 6 months prior to a scan up until the day before the scan. So it is common to experience this anxiety, so the goal for future work is not to eliminate this, but more to help individuals manage it. So my study is showing that the age of the individual, as well as how they're approaching their scans in the months and days prior, need to be considered in order to effectively create interventions for this group of individuals. So just quickly, I wanted to give some acknowledgments to the individuals who helped make this possible. My team at NC State, Dr. Siobhan Newkirk and Lindsay Graham, who helped me collect this data. Dr. Edwin Fisher at the UNC Gilling School of Global Public Health, who connected me to LCI, as well as Jenny and Colleen for helping with participant recruitment and outreach. NC Tracks, who helped fund this study, and finally all of my family and friends who have pushed me through this program and have allowed me to continue this. So we may have a few minutes for questions if anyone has anything, but thank you so much for listening.
Everybody, thanks for having us. I'm Jamie Limbaugh, and this is
Megan Manchifico.
So we didn't really get to talk too much about on this slide what we do or who we are. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro with that. Well, first we'll kind of tell you why we're here. So as far as me, my credentialing is I'm a clinical exercise physiologist with the American College of Sports Medicine and a registered dietitian. So I've worked with cancer nutritionally and exercise for the past 20 years. And Megan, that's not what you do.
I graduated with a bachelor's in exercise physiology from West Virginia University, and I began working with Jamie back in May of 2021. And I haven't looked back since.
That's pretty great. So we'll kind of go to our mission statement. I like to freestyle talk, not so much with the slides, so just bear with me. So Crystal Coast Cancer Rehab, I'm the founder of it, and thankfully I have Megan, so to help execute it. But what we do and how it was born was doing XFIZ for the last 20 years. And anybody that doesn't really know what that is, it's not physical therapy. I'm not physical therapy. I'm more the disease state exercise. And so I always noticed that there was a gap. And when I say a gap, I've seen cancer survivors going through treatment, and then treatment's over. And I always wondered, how can we put back together the pieces? You know what I'm saying? What do we do at that point? They've gone through this huge journey, and we want to support them. And then how can we continue to support them? Besides survivor groups, which are great, but how can we do this exercise-wise? The research is out there showing that exercise during treatment is extremely beneficial on some of the things that they've talked about today: anxiety, just overall fatigue, muscle density, bone density. So. They're really excited about this presentation. Somebody just let them in. So we're like, I'm going, all right, so how can I do this? I've done this for long enough. How can we make this a nonprofit? So with a really good glass of wine and a laptop, it became an LLC, and then the hard part was the IRS, and it became a 501c3. Because we wanted everyone to make sure that they had the opportunity. So we wanted to reduce as much overhead costs as possible. So becoming a nonprofit was absolutely vital. Okay? So from there, we grew our mission statement. So you can go ahead. Oh, it's up there. No one fights alone with Crystal Coast Cancer Rehab, meaning that one of the biggest things, in preliminary research in our facility, we've grown from one person to, we have a capacity of 50 and we're at 48 right now. So the biggest, besides all of the metrics that I just told you, the muscle, the fatigue, is that camaraderie. The fact that and for some of you, shake your head, you're a survivor, you come through that door, you're not your cancer diagnosis. We try to do that 1 hour where you're just there. You take off your hair, you take off your prosthetics, whatever it is. At that point, it is Megan's job to just have you laugh and joke. Have a good time as best you can in that hour. Okay? Do you want to speak anything more about
We try to be as available as possible. We are a shoulder to cry on. Since all of our clients are local, they need a ride to the hospital, they can't catch a ride from someone. We put everything on the table. You need a dinner, we'll bring you a dinner. When we say no one fights alone, we truly mean you will never not have someone by your side. So that's very important to us.
Go ahead. Okay, so we'll get into the exercises, but I want to describe to you what our program is like, and then Megan is going to take you through some of the exercises. Okay, so we modeled this, and you'll see the slide at the end, from the University of Northern Colorado. I was like, surely there's got to be another program like this. Like, I can't do that model of my thinking, you know? And so Google led me to Northern Colorado, so I got on the phone and said, hey, his name is Mike. I love what you're doing. You guys are ex-biz based. I love it. I want to come out there. So we flew out there for a week, and I got to see them. And this is something they've been doing for 20 years. And uniquely, that's not to say there isn't one, I've not found another program like it. And so kind of modeled everything off of that, and then we did our own spin for our area. So we have 4 phases. Phase 1 starts the diagnosis. Okay, so we have a fantastic relationship with Cartwright Healthcare and the oncologist and the radiologist there. So from the time of diagnosis, they get referred to us. And that means before treatment. So before treatment, we're hitting the ground running. Okay, we're going to retain as much muscle density, bone density, strength as possible in that phase 1. Our preliminary data is very, very, very hopeful that we've had 50% of our survivors, at least 50%, I think it's actually 85%, have maintained at least 50% of their strength. So we baseline them, and then after each phase, we do a follow-up. So then phase 2, I'll let you explain phase 2.
Okay, so phase 2, it can also be for people who are just joining our program, but they're not in treatment. So if they're not in treatment, we will automatically put them into phase 2. Phase 1, we keep a close eye on vitals through all the phases, but phase 1 is most important because some of the chemotherapies can be cardiotoxic, which means it can damage your heart muscles. And they've seen many, many years down the line, there's damage to the heart, there's heart failure. So we try to avoid that as much as possible. We have heart rate sensors that our clients wear, and we get direct feedback on their heart rate. And through calculations, we're able to decide what their heart rate max will be. So while they're exercising, we have good stopping points throughout the workout. If they're too high, we'll have to sit down and do a little cool down before we jump back in, just because we don't want to be the reason that our heart is straining even more than it already is. So with phase 2, those are those who have either finished phase 1 completely, which is about 12 weeks, or it's for those that have already finished treatment, and we don't have to worry so much about their heart health.
All right, then phase 3, it's kind of a continuation. This is where the real rehab is kind of starting. So phase 2 goes into phase 3. They're all 12 weeks long, okay? So the first 3 parts are 36 weeks, and then phase 4 can go on for as long as they want to stay in the program. That's when we transition to group, which is what gets really fun, because our groups get kind of crazy. They get really wild. So the whole thing is typically a year, but we've got some people that have continued on and decided that they like it so much that they want to stay. All right, so we want to give you a little bit of an idea of what it's like. These are just some basic exercises that we'll do. So I'll let the exercise specialist be the one to do it.
So this one is more specific for lung cancer. We see any type of cancer. Anyone under the sun who has had a diagnosis, we will see you. But for lung cancer, I was thinking that it's important to focus more on the diaphragm and all the muscles in the chest, because those are most likely to be affected by radiation or by the cancer itself. So one of the main things I immediately thought of is your breathing. It's something you do subconsciously, but it's also important to do it consciously, where you can think of that deep, deep breath, feel like you can truly expand your lungs all the way, hold it for a second or 2, and then push all that air out of your lungs. And I do have a little handout that I can give to you all later. This has a little more explanation on it. But if you breathe in, really lift those shoulders up, and as you breathe out, think of pushing your belly out. Sometimes as we get older, we don't really breathe with our belly. If you look at like a baby, you can truly see their stomachs moving as they breathe. That's because they're using their whole diaphragm and really expanding their lungs. And we kind of grow out of that as we get older. So sometimes it is important to go back to deep breath with those shoulders, and as you breathe out, let those shoulders deflate. So even something as simple as that can be an exercise for your body.
I feel like we should all clear our lungs when we say, do 3 deep breaths.
Yeah, and you guys can stay seated if you'd like. But usually we do it by counts. So say we'll breathe in for 5 seconds, hold it for 3, and then breathe out for 5. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then hold it, and then force all that air out of your lungs. This is also really great for anxiety. Deep breathing is really helpful in reducing anxiety, which we're going to do a callback. But it's very good for grounding. It's very good for your health in general. It helps lower blood pressure over time if you think about that deep diaphragmatic breathing. Okay, the next one is more like exercise. This is also a good one because you can use even basic household items. You don't have to have a fully stocked gym. You can do this from your home, or you don't have to worry about your immune system. I've recommended like Campbell soup cans, gallons of milk, anything that you could easily hold by your ears. And then I always say, like, you're knocking on a door. Sometimes people try to turn their wrist, and then you just push your arms up by your ears.
Okay, come on, come with this.
And even just doing this, if you do it long enough and you squeeze those muscles, you'll feel that fatigue over time. And then if you find that this is getting too easy, that's when you can grab a can of Coke, a bottle of soup, or whatever. And over time, you can slowly build yourself up. And if you go to a gym, you can use a dumbbell or a barbell, or you can use resistant bands. There's a lot of options if you feel like you're starting from the ground up. Okay, the next one was also mentioned in theirs. It is one of my favorites. These are sit-to-stands, but some people call them box squats. But this is another good one that we can do right now if you'd like. But, so this is good. I always say plant your feet right underneath your knees about shoulder width apart, so when you stand, you're as balanced as possible. And as you stand up, you can kind of cheat a little by bringing your shoulders forward, because sometimes people find they'll go to stand and kind of rock back down to the butt, but that's just because you don't have your chest far enough forward. This is another good one that if you do it long enough, you will feel that burn, and a lot of people underestimate that. And they mentioned their 5 times sit to stand. That is one of the tests we do in the beginning. So we do the 5 times sit to stand test, and then we also do a 30-second test, which is part of our baseline testing. But if you want to make it a little more difficult, instead of pushing off, we like to have our arms across our chest. So you sit, and then you fully stand up, knees fully straight. I like to think about squeezing your booty muscles, and then you can sit back down.
Let's try to go and try 5 of them.
Yeah, we can do it.
Come on, PTs, we need the example. So if you don't know what you're doing, just look at the PTs.
Yeah, our friends up front.
Yeah, our friends at our table.
All right, so arms across your chest, get those feet planted right underneath your knees, and you can fully stand up. Make sure that butt gets tucked under, and then you can fully sit back down. And as you get the hang of it, you can just do a little tap instead of a full sit. You can go up and down.
All right, everybody's starting to feel it already?
Yeah. And we sometimes have our clients hold a plate or a dumbbell or a medicine ball, anything to add a little bit of resistance. So again, if you guys have like a dining room chair, something solid, like a recliner would be great. But something solid on the ground, you can do these all day long, and it will benefit you. It's like getting off the couch, getting out of your car. This is a very basic movement that we do almost every day without realizing it. All right, this is the last example we have. Like I said, I have a little handout that we can pass around that has more examples of exercises. This is a good one because you can do it either seated or standing up. So this one is just high knee lift.
So if you want, you can stand and do it. You can hold onto the table. You can sit and do it.
There's a lot of variations with all of these, so it's almost everyone can do these. This is great for balance also. We love working on balance at Crystal Coast Cancer Rehab. So this can also be a cardio element. The faster you go, the harder it gets. And as you go, you'll notice that you're starting to fatigue a little. And like Jamie said, you can hold on. I have my clients do this at home at the kitchen sink. Just hold their hands and step up and down. And then you can start working on your balance.
So this is a picture of one of our survivors. She gave us permission. This is kind of one of our exercises that we will do at our facility for balance, a lot of balance, for density, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, the University of Northern Colorado, if anyone was interested, this is their logo and it's UNCCRI. It's really confusing because Mike would always be like, yeah, UNC, and I'm like, what? And it's University of Northern Colorado. It was Chapel Hill in my head, you know? So we continue to work with them, strength in numbers, right? So they're a big ally of ours in the Midwest. I think it's still considered the Midwest. Central part of the country, yes, Colorado. So we continue to work with them. That's a picture of our facility.
And that's one of our clients, Linda. She's been there since I started working there, which is over a year and a half. So that just shows how fun we are. And she's a very, very hard worker, which is exactly what we love.
And so we have 2 locations. If anyone's ever in Morgan City, we're happy to have you. One City and Cedar Point. This is our beautiful outside of our facility. We do have another specialist, Jacob, that was able to be here. He says hi. That was really kind of what our presentation was. We weren't really sure what you guys wanted. We wanted to just kind of brag about us and let you know that exercise is great. Start from the time of diagnosis. If you have someone that gets diagnosed as a survivor, continue, keep going, keep working out. Definitely try to find someone that is knowledgeable in the world of cancer and exercise, because there are a lot of limitations, whether it be medical or just things, you don't have to think about. Let us do it, okay? Do you guys have any questions?
So my name's Sanjay, and this is Alicia. So a friend and colleague for many years, actually. When I walked in the hotel today, I felt like I might be a little underdressed because I saw a lot of people with very nice hair and red dresses, and I was like, oh, what am I getting myself into? I just wanted to kind of say thank you to the Lung Cancer Initiative for putting this on. And one of the things I think we got diagnosed in 2019 with EGFR exon 20. It was one of those things where the pandemic happened, and a lot of these types of support and group kind of meetings just didn't happen as much. And I think that it's such a blessing to know that we're a part of a larger community and to have the benefit of other people's experience to help guide us going forward. And that's sort of my reason for being here today. I met with Paige a few times after Jody died about things that we could possibly do to help the cause or other people who get diagnosed with lung cancer. And one of the things I sort of realized throughout that is there's a lot of introspection that happens when you're going through this process. And then when Jody passed away, I started really looking back at what are the things about the journey that helped us. And I kept coming back to one thing, and that was the introduction of early palliative care. I think that's one of the things that there's a misconception, I think, about palliative care, sort of equating with hospice or end of life. And my goal really is to sort of maybe educate, our community that that's not really the role of palliative care. It's an important part of it, but palliative care was one of the things that really helped us get through the day-to-day. And I think, so that really was kind of what I talked to Paige about, saying that, I really felt that was very important. And I don't know, how many people know that or have the resources to be able to do that, particularly in the community. I'm from Durham, I'm born and raised, and we lived there, and so we were going to Duke Cancer Center, which is great to have all these different resources available, but a lot of people don't necessarily have that. So how can we help maybe introduce this idea? I think all of us sort of can think back to that initial diagnosis, that meeting with the oncologist for the first time, or whatever it is, and you sort of are really, literally drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot of information coming at you at once. Treatment options, the future, what does that look like? And for us, that was, obviously we have 2 now adolescent kids, but that was something that really factored into our thought processing. Alicia, I think, sent me an email early on about a colleague of hers at Duke. Dr. Kamal is who we use, but and we've got diagnosed in September, and then had our first palliative care appointment at the end of November. And I really felt it was important as an emergency physician. I'd seen how important palliative care is even in my specialty, because we see a lot of patients at different levels of illness, and palliative care has just been a great resource to help manage some of those symptoms, and whether it's transitioning at the end of life too, but I think that it was one of those things where I recognized the importance of it, and so I sought that out because we had that background. We went and had our first appointment, and it was really pretty amazing. We had a lot. We've talked. I only saw a few of the lectures, but obviously, yes, there's a lot of stress, anxiety, all these different things, and there are different coping mechanisms for sure. But I think, I don't know if other people have had this experience, but you have your appointment at whatever cancer center or hospital you go to or clinic, and then you walk with your partner to your car, and you sit in the car, and you kind of debrief a little bit, and you're sitting in the car, and you're saying, hey, how do I feel? What do you think? So it's like, these parking garage moments, for us. And so we had a kind of a parking garage moment after our first visit, which was, well, wow, you know what? I feel a lot better about where we are. We've kind of talked about a plan. We talked about, we felt like we had, a primary care physician for our cancer journey. And that was what Dr. Kamal and palliative care was for us. And so that was symptom management. We went through various trials. Exon 20 is a little bit of a more challenging mutation, although there's more research every day that's really amazing. It's helping, people with that mutation and all types of cancer, but lung cancer in particular. But, symptom management, there's definitely some mental health components to their, help for us in terms of, being able to provide medications, and Jody did engage in counseling and other things. And then, they really also were able to help us with some of those future decisions that, no one really thinks about sometimes until they're faced with something like this. And, that was just really important for us to have that guide, to be able to do that. The other thing about it was when we were in that car, it was like, we sort of, kind of like an Atlas Shrugged moment, because there are different tools that Alicia will talk about that, are important, and you start thinking about them, and, a lot of these unknowns that you're faced with, they actually are surmountable, and once we were able to put some of those things behind us, or kind of get them on a shelf, because we kind of talked about it and taken care of it, it actually really freed us, and Jody in particular, to be able to manage and continue on the actual treatment journey, right? Because you're not thinking about these other things. We were able to get that off the table, at that moment, and that was a very freeing feeling, and I think it was something that we really appreciated. And then obviously, the end when Jody was at home on hospice, the palliative team was just amazing, and they were able to really help guide us through that process. We've been very blessed to have a lot of family and friends, both locally and around the world, frankly, come to help us, and just being able to manage that in a dignified way was really amazing. And I think that it's one of those things that I look back and there are a lot of things that were challenging about the journey, but man, there were a lot of things that were actually really positive about how it made us feel, the things that it made us talk about and think about, and I feel like it made us better human beings in some ways, and so I really appreciate that. And like I said, I think that when I look back, palliative care and the early presence of them in our treatment journey was really important, and really helped Jody with nausea and vomiting, all the different side effects from the various trial drugs that we did. They helped guide us through physical therapy and exercise. Jody was a marathon runner, and so she, valued that part of her life, which, frankly, lung cancer and bone metastasis and those kinds of things took away. But she was able to recognize the importance of that. So once again, Dr. Kamal helped kind of navigate some of that. And he also helped communicate between our medical oncology team, our radiation oncology team, our surgery team. Jody never had surgery for the cancer itself, but she had a pericardial effusion at diagnosis and needed that drained. So we went to the hospital for a few days for that at the beginning. But he just was able to do all those things, and like I said, it was really instrumental in helping guide us. So with that, I just feel honored to be a part of this community, and obviously it's the club that no one wants to be a part of, but when you're a part of it, we're pretty cool. We're going to do some good things, and we're going to be there for each other, and that's really what I hope for going forward. But I'm going to let Alicia talk more about some of the palliative specific things.
Hi everybody. So as Sunday said, I'm a palliative care doctor at Duke. I was an internal medicine doctor, a hospitalist at Wayne for about 12 years before I went back for palliative medicine training. And the reason I went back for training is I felt that patients and their families needed everything to slow down. That everything is fast in the hospital, it is fast in the clinic. And palliative care gives us time with patients and their loved ones and their circle of care. Is that family, is that blood, is that best friend? And I think that that's really important because only in the moments where we slow down do we actually hear and give people the opportunity to share what's most important so we match their medical treatment plan and their journey and their values. Okay? And so palliative care is really appropriate at any stage of illness for anybody who is having a depreciation in their quality of life for any reason due to serious illness. Palliative care doesn't mean you have treatment options. It doesn't mean you're appropriate for hospice. All it means is another level of support might be helpful to help you have a better day. Okay? And I say this to my patients all the time. The goal of all of us on this planet, all of us, those of us with serious illness, those of us caring for people with serious illness, those of us who are just aging, the goal of all of this is as many good days as possible. Right? That's our goal on this planet. And that's our goal as palliative care physicians to say, what's keeping you from having your best day? And what does your best day look like? And let's match your values and your treatment plan. We don't replace anybody on the team. We don't actually but
That's all right.
but I think it's actually, I think it's an important parallel because primary care doctors look at you from head to toe, and so do palliative care. We're not the cardiologist who look at the heart, we're not the cancer doctor who look at the cancer, we're not the kidney doctor. We're stepping back and saying, how do you feel head to toe? Let's talk about how things are going, regardless of the disease that's most impacting you. How are you feeling outside of that, right? Because you may have neuropathy related to diabetes that's completely unrelated to cancer, right? So anything that's bothering you, we're here to help with. Palliative care can be delivered in the hospital. We do inpatient palliative care, we do outpatient palliative care, and Transition Life Care, which is a wonderful organization in Wake County, does home-based palliative care. So there's lots of ways to get to access palliative care. I think this is really important because I think this is how I introduce palliative care, because I think there's a lot of fear when people hear the term palliative care. What does that mean? I'm going to refer to palliative care. And I think in fairness to physicians, oncologists, APPs that are referring to palliative care is the newest specialty of medicine. It's the new kid on the block. And a lot of oncologists and physicians actually don't even really know what palliative care is and what we do. And so when they say I'm sitting in palliative care, there's a lot of kind of mistrust, I think, in that referral. Because people don't know what that means. Are things more serious? Are they not telling me something? A lot of people walk in with a lot of trepidation into our visits, or some people don't even come to their initial visits, and we have to go back and circle back and say, let me tell you what we do. This is what we do. So I walk in the room and I say, hey, I'm a palliative care doctor, and we do 3 things. Number 1, we try to be really good at symptom management, and that's anything bothering you head to toe. It'll be the number of symptoms that the patient might be having, and then I have things they may not be thinking that we would address. Anxiety, insomnia, fatigue, hiccups, itching, whatever. Number two, we provide support. And I always say to the patient, because this is tough stuff, not just on you, but on the people that love you. Right? Because this is tough. This is a family, this is a village illness. Right? And number three is the most important, is that we make sure that we identify what patients and families and circle of trust values are, and make sure that the treatment plan aligns. And that's really important. I think there are some people, and I say this to most of my patients, there are some people with cancer who say they're willing to go through anything for the promise of more time. And some people say the most important to me is having as many good days as possible. And most people are in the middle. And most people zip up and down that line. So it's really important to check in at every visit. How are you? How are things going? Are we taking care of your priorities? Is your cancer treatment and your cancer plan aligning with your values? And going back to the symptom management, I think it's really important. I can't overstate the importance of symptom management. I think a lot of people going through cancer treatment think that they need to be suffering. That suffering is inherently part of the cancer treatment. Nausea, pain, fatigue, that they expect that this is part of it, loss of appetite. And while some of that might be true, there are tools that we have to mitigate those symptoms to give you a better day, right? There are medications for fatigue, right? There are medications to help with appetite, and there are certainly medications for pain, long-acting, short-acting medications for pain. I do a lot of work dispelling myths around addiction, because that's a real concern for many patients and their families, is what is it going to mean if I'm taking opiate narcotics, if I'm taking narcotic medications? What does that mean for me psychologically? What does that mean for addiction? Am I going to be adding another problem to my plate? So we do a lot of education around what addiction actually means, and that treating your pain appropriately under the supervision of a physician who knows what they're doing with narcotics is appropriate management of pain to get you back to that best day possible. Okay? I want to spend a little bit of time, Sanjay had talked a little bit about advanced care planning documentation, and that was helpful for him. So I want to just introduce this a little bit, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around advanced care planning documentation. So the most important thing is there are two buckets of advanced care planning documentations. And I made this up, it's true. Anyways, so future care planning documents. These are things that are a future state document. They do not apply today. I'm going to give you examples of them in just a second. But these are things like healthcare power of attorney, living wills, and the 5 wishes form. I brought a couple of copies to look at. Versus medical orders. So some of you may have seen, some of you are medical, have seen the yellow DNR form. I have a picture of it here, and something called the pink most form. Those are current documents that impact your medical care as of today. Okay? And I think that's really important, because a lot of people interpret things like a living will as a do not resuscitate, and that's actually not the case. Okay? So it's important to know what your documents mean. So healthcare power of attorney, in North Carolina, this does need to be notarized. These forms are free online. That's the link for it. I'm going to take a picture of it online. These are free. You don't need an attorney to help you with this. It costs nothing to fill out these documents. Okay? Well, the hospital's free. But anyways, if you go to UPS, it's $4. But anyways. So what's important about a healthcare power of attorney is to understand what their role is and what their role isn't, right? If anybody in this room has a healthcare power of attorney, they have no power today over you, right? A power of attorney only takes over and helps you make medical decisions if you're ever too sick or too sleepy to make your medical decisions. Now, I know it's late in the day and you've had lunch, but that's nobody in this room today, right? So healthcare power of attorney does not have authority over medical choices unless you have lost the ability to speak for yourself. Does that make sense? So it's a future state document, okay? And it's really important to understand. I ask everybody, I always call this my toe in the water approach. I always ask people, do you have somebody that would make your medical decisions if you were ever too sick or too sleepy? And 99% of patients say, I sure do, right? And they say, it's my husband, it's my daughter, it's my best friend, it's whoever. And then I always say, I'm so glad you have Joe, who you trust to make your medical decisions. Have you and Joe talked about what will be important for you or what your healthcare wishes are? And about 99% of patients say, we haven't talked about it. So it's really important not only to pick someone that you trust who will honor your values and speak your voice, not what they want for you, but what you want for you, not the family member that won't get out of care, right? You want to make sure that that's someone who has heard what's important to you and it will honor your wishes. That's really important, okay? And this form is signed only by the patient. The healthcare power of attorney does not, the surrogate decision maker doesn't have to sign the form. Without this form, this is North Carolina, this is the legal chain of authority. And so if this isn't not what you want, you've got to fill out something different. So it's the patient, the healthcare power of attorney, the guardian, and then if the patient has lost their healthcare power, if they've lost their ability to communicate their wishes, it goes to the spouse. And then it goes to adult parents or parents or adult children equally. And then it goes to siblings equally. So if you think your sister, please just know that she might have authority to make her decisions. So this is an important thing. If you don't have this piece of paper, you've got to think about who's going to be making your healthcare decisions. And I will tell you that this thing about the spouse, the reason I highlighted this and wrote this in, I've had a number of people say to me, and I always ask, have you ever been married? And they say yes. And I say, are you still married? And they say, well, no. I say, are you legally divorced? And they say, no. And I say, aha. Because the person you are estranged from is still your spouse. And they will make your medical decisions. And if you hate them, that's probably not the person you want to make your decisions. So it is important to fill this paper out if you are not legally divorced. Okay? So I really do encourage people to fill out healthcare power of attorney paperwork. I filled it out, my husband filled it out. Because it's important to think carefully about who would support your medical decisions. Okay? And it doesn't have to be a relative, it can be your best friend. Okay? It can be anybody that you feel will honor your wishes. And this is another example of a future state document. Okay? Again, these are free, no lawyers involved, there's no lawyers in the room, I'm sorry. Anyways, so free, you just need to get notarized. And the reason it's important to understand that this is, a lot of people fill this out and think this is, oh, I've made my wishes clear. This form only takes effect if you meet one of 3 conditions. And they're right here. You can't see them. But it says you have an incurable, irreversible condition with a short life expectancy. Well, what does that even mean? Right? That's a pretty abstract concept for most people, right? The second one is you're unconscious and unlikely to regain consciousness. Again, that's nobody in this room, right? And number 3 is advanced dementia or loss of cognition. Again, these are future state documents, so it's important to understand that this document does not have any impact on your care today. I refer to this as a quality of life document, okay? This really tells your loved ones what's important to you, okay? My wishes form is the one that Sanjay wrote up and felt was particularly helpful. And I really like this form because it is, again, it's a future state, it's an advanced care planning document, but it encapsulates not only a healthcare power of attorney form, but also a living will form, okay? And I think what's important is, so this is a form that is legal in most states. It does have to be notarized in North Carolina for unclear reasons. But anyways, so the first page here is healthcare power of attorney. Who do I want to serve? Number 1, number 2, number 3. If you want people to serve jointly, you can indicate that. This is what I think is important. So it has that same language about if I'm in a coma, if I'm close to death, or I have brain damage. But what I think is here, this is what's important, right? This is another condition in which I would not want my life to be sustained with artificial means or aggressive means, right? Because a lot of people are never going to be in a coma that's going to recover, so you're brain damage or close to death. This tells people I would or would not want dialysis, right? I do or do not want blood transfusions. I do or do not want radiation. I do or do not want chemotherapy, right? I do or do not want, if I'm unable to communicate for myself, then I would want to focus on comfort. If I'm not able to care for myself, and what does that mean? Does that mean I can't walk anymore? I had a patient who hasn't gotten out of bed in 20 years, and she hangs out with her family. She has an illness that took away her ability. She's what we call functional quadriplegic, meaning she can't really move her arms and her legs. She eats, her family feeds her, and she watches TV, and that is quality of life for her. And she is happy that she's like, this is joy for me. I get to spend time with my family and I eat the food that I love. And so then she said, and if I couldn't do that, if I couldn't communicate with my family, or I couldn't consume the food that I love, I would not want my life sustained. So it could be anything, right? What makes life valuable for you? And this is a place to spell that out if you're ever in a position not to be able to communicate with your family members. Does that make sense? This is, talks about, as someone gets closer to death, what they want people to know about them. What are my wishes that people should know about me? What kind of care do I want towards the end of life? And people can circle stuff, they can cross stuff off. How comfortable do I want to be? Do I want pain medicines enough that I might be sleepy? Would I rather be more uncomfortable as long as I can be awake? You're able to spell these things out in this document. Again, this document does not make medical decisions for anyone. This is a guide for your surrogate decision maker. Does that make sense? This is just where you started. This is different. This is called a MOST form, and there are varieties of this across the country. This is a national initiative. There's in North Carolina, it's called the MOST form, which is medical orders for scope of treatment, and other states it's called the MOLST form, which is medical orders for life-sustaining treatment, or POLST form, which is physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. This again is a current state doc. This says, in my current state of health, if something were to happen to me today, this is the medical care that I desire. And the reason that I think this form is important is because the top of this form talks about the decision around resuscitation. If I have no pulse and not breathing, what kind of care do I want? The rest of the form relates to, if I'm sick, what kind of care do I want? Including going to the intensive care unit and bring on a breathing machine. It's important that people understand the DNR does not impact your ability to be on a breathing machine if you had COVID, right? Or if you had a pneumonia. So it's important that this form allows further delineation of choices around your medical care. And then there's some parts of the rest of it is really around things like antibiotics and IV fluids and tube feeding. But I think this is an important document because it, again, allows people to say, this is the care that I want as of today. And we recommend these forms for people we don't recommend these forms for everyone, okay? We recommend these forms for patients who have serious illness whose time might be shorter. Understanding that this is a piece of paper that can be torn up and replaced at any time. These documents are not carved in stone. And you can say at any time, you know what, I thought about it some more and I want to make a different decision. You can tear it up and make a new form. But this is a way of making sure that your wishes and your values are honored by your medical team. And this is signed by you as the patient, and it's signed by your medical team. Okay. So those are kind of the advanced, isn't it?
Where do you get those forms?
Sure. So I brought some, if you like some, I brought 5 wishes in Spanish. Because my team will let me steal them to the English ones. But anyway, so doctors' offices have these forms. I did bring some sample ones, but you can ask your team for a MOST form or a 5 wishes form. Healthcare power of attorney and living will, these things are online. I'll send you that link. Or I should get that link.
The 5 wishes, when I was having coffee, the page, I sort of looked, like I said, I looked back and I was like, the 5 wishes document for us. And once again, I think it's very important to understand all these things are individual. All these things are based on your comfort level and where you are mentally, and and I don't know. So maybe I was sort of more thoughtful about this stuff than Jody was, and maybe I dragged her along. I don't think so. We kind of had good conversations about all this, but to me, these are documents and these are thoughts and these are plans that you have but you hope you never use, right? And you can do things in parallel. One of the things I realized throughout our journey was multiple things are true at the same time. Like you kind of realize that when you go through this, you're like, yes, this is the worst thing. It's like the first line of A Tale of Two Cities. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, right? So cancer was the worst of times, but it was also some of the best of times. And I think that one of the things for us was saying, hey, you know what, we got this stuff done, we did it early, we were able to kind of get it, off the table, on the shelf, wherever, so that we could actually concentrate on the other thing, which was how do we, continue and treat, this cancer, and what are we doing to help our symptoms? What are we doing to make that, every day as good as it could be? And that's kind of where I think you can do both. And that's what I hope people get from, kind of an introduction to what palliative care is about, because it's both those things. And I will say, when we were at home on hospice, and we came home on a Saturday night, and she passed away Monday morning. But so it was very, very quick for us. But I think that during that time, we were comfortable. We had all the things set up, the hospital, all these things that hospice helped us with. But I think the fundamental thing for us was at that moment, I wasn't worried about what she, wanted or, how she wanted. Because one of the things, she had leptomeningeal disease, which, is an involvement of the lining of the brain and things like that, so she couldn't communicate. She had a stroke, and so she couldn't move the left side. And so there are a lot of things about her journey that, once again, just specific to her, But at the same time, I couldn't communicate with her at the end about what she really wanted at that moment. But you know what? I didn't have to because we had all of them, I still have the 5 wishes document that she filled out. I mean, it's actually a special document, right? Because it's in her handwriting, it's what she wrote for me. And so, for us and for her, those are her wishes. And so, I think that when I look at it that way, this was really powerful for us to be able to have that. And it really kept me from really worrying about these things, like, once again, I don't mean morbid, but, memorials and things like that. I mean, I knew already what she wanted. And so it really allowed us to focus on comfort and the transition from a life well lived and really concentrate on having our family with us and, our kids there and that side. So, all that stuff, I think might have been different had I been faced with some of this other stuff. So that's really the main goal and point of trying to introduce it to people. It's not, like I said, hopefully it's documents that, stay on the shelf for a very long time. And I believe that, they will for most people, but at the same time, we just have that ability to know that they're not going to come to it.
I think it's important, when I say to my patients and families all the time, is talking about what's important to you doesn't change, doesn't make you the same person you were 5 minutes before we had this conversation. Talking about these things doesn't change anything about your disease. But what it does do is empower people around you to know what's important to you. And that's a gift. And I talk about that. People worry mostly about being a burden at the end of life. That's one of their biggest concerns. And I intentionally talk about it. If your family doesn't know what's important to you, your loved ones don't know what's important to you, that can feel like a burden. I know that we've had this conversation lots of times at the bedside where families say, I don't know, we never talked about it. This empowers you to have this important conversation with your family, and it doesn't change anything else about your health. But it does empower them to take care of you that's important should that arise. Any questions? Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us.